He was left behind because he was seen as weak, but he's actually a powerful god keeping his strength hidden. Yogairai, who seems feeble and unimportant, walks through a hallway full of dead bodies and bullets flying everywhere. He's looking for Asako, his guardian. He heads towards a room, and as the door swings open, he sees a woman holding Asako at gunpoint. The woman demands silence from Asako and threatens Yogairai not to move or she'll shoot Asako. Then suddenly the woman falls dead. Yogairai, unfazed, embraces Asako and suggests they go back. Then Yogairai is suddenly woken up by his classmate Tamachika, who is freaking out. Yogairai had been napping on a class trip and wonders if they've arrived, but Tamachika points out something alarming. Yogairai sees some classmates dead, covered in blood, with one impaled by a mysterious object. Looking outside, Yogairai throws a microphone to investigate and discovers a giant dragon attacking the bus. As Tamachika clings to him in fear, Yogairai commands the dragon to die, and it unexpectedly collapses. Tamachika is confused and wants to know what's happening. Yogairai asks Tamachika to tell him what happened. She explains that on their bus ride, they were transported to a strange field after going through a tunnel. A girl named Sean boarded the bus, claimed she was looking for sage candidates, and demonstrated her power shockingly. Sean introduced a system called the Gift, which could turn students into sages, warning that failure to do so within a month would doom them to become magical energy sources. Their first task was to evade a dragon, but not all students were chosen to receive this gift. Yuzaki tries to lead, asking everyone to share their strengths and weaknesses. However, he excludes Tamachika and 3 others for not having the gift, demonstrating his newfound strength rudely. Despite protests, Yuzaki's plan involves using a classmate's charm ability to lure the dragon away, sacrificing the 4 without gifts. They decide to escape through the bus window, leaving the situation behind. Outside, Tamachika notices 3 of their classmates can fly. Yogairai, amazed by her good eyesight, asks if he should stop them. She questions his thinking, but Yogairai argues they were ready to leave them for dead and might be dangerous. The flying guys, upset that Yogairai and Tamachika survived, admit they wanted to use Tamachika's body for their own plans. When they attack with a fireball, Yogairai stops them simply by saying they should die, and they do, leaving only one, Fatso, alive. Yogairai warns him not to move and then makes him check his friend's conditions. When Fatso realizes his healing won't work, he tries to attack Yogairai but gives up and puts on a slave collar, following Yogairai's order to leave without harming them. Tamachika questions Yogairai's decision, but he trusts his judgment. She wonders why Yogairai chooses to protect her, to which he jokingly credits her interesting personality, making her upset. They reach a city and meet Mariu, a fox girl who offers to guide them, but they end up ambushed. Yogairai effortlessly deals with the attackers with his unique power, even blinding one instead of killing him outright. Mariu pleads for mercy, but Yogairai dismisses her excuses. When the guards arrive, Yogairai convinces them they're just lost and harmless because they supposedly have no special abilities. The guards let them go, and they're taken to a mansion for the night. There, Tamachika meets a spirit named Mikamoko, who claims to be her ancestral guardian, appearing now to assist her in crisis. Tamachika is puzzled why the help came only at this moment. The spirit tells Tamachika she stayed hidden because she feared Yogairai might make her disappear. She explains that Tamachika doesn't have a special power because the spirit was protecting her from it, since these powers let Sean control people. Despite Tamachika's frustration, the spirit is excited to have found someone to carry on her archery tradition. Tamachika is more focused on getting back to their own world, but knows she needs Yogairai's help for now. The spirit is thrilled to teach Tamachika real fighting skills. The next day, while on a train, Yogairai suddenly saves Tamachika from an explosion caused by a battle outside. They see a giant robot fighting someone called a sage. Tamachika wonders if Yogairai can stop them since they're in the way, but Yogairai says he has to be careful with his power to not just kill anyone who bothers him. A big attack nearly hits them, but the robot gets hit instead. When the sage attacks them directly, Yogairai protects Tamachika and then decides the sage has crossed the line, causing the sage to suddenly fall down, defeated. The robot then talks to Yogairai, wanting to make a deal out of fear. Yogairai asks about going back to their world, but the robot says it can't take someone as dangerous as Yogairai with it. It explains that moving between worlds is tough, needing lots of energy and exact directions. Yogairai then seeks advice on how to gather what's needed to go home. Meanwhile, the defeat of the sage by Yogairai becomes known, sparking interest and concern among others with powers. As they camp in the woods, Tamachika's ancestor turns her underwear into a sword for protection. Reaching a city that reminds Tamachika of Japan, she notices Yogairai seems worn out, which he says is normal after dealing with enemies along their journey. This makes her wonder if his strength has limits. Yogairai explains that he can use his power freely but gets tired afterward. Entering the city, they notice its defenses are made of barriers instead of walls. Spotting a large hotel they were told about, they decide to stay there and run into their classmate Takabana. He's glad to see Tamachika and explains he left the others because he found their methods of gaining experience inefficient. However, a maid who seems to dislike Tamachika's friendly interaction with Takabana is quickly silenced by him, revealing he's surrounded by 5 bodyguard maids. The maids introduce themselves with a hint of threat towards Tamachika, which confuses her. Takabana, trying to smooth over the situation, admits he's not good at managing the girls. Yogairai inquires if Takabana had also abandoned them, but it's clear he's confident without an apparent reason. Tamachika dismisses Takabana's behavior as typical, noting his popularity and ego. Takabana then boldly suggests Tamachika become his girlfriend, dismissing Yogairai as a non-threat. He boasts about his dominator class, which allows him to control those weaker than him. Tamachika retorts that his level isn't as high as those training seriously. Takabana shares advice he received from Four Eyes, a strategist who suggested exploiting his class by acquiring low-level servants to gain experience and control. Yogairai and Tamachika are unimpressed by Takabana's plan, and she outright rejects his proposition. Despite Yogairai's suggestion that staying with Takabana might be safer, Tamachika is annoyed. Later, as Yogairai rests, Tamachika grows restless after 3 days of staying indoors, wishing to explore outside, but the spirit refuses to check on Yogairai, fearing his reaction. Tamachika suddenly sees Smoke on the streets as Lane's subordinate. The one tasked with dealing with Yogairai enters the city and causes destruction. He announces that his immortal army is recruiting and that anyone who dies will become a zombie soldier. The spirit warns Tamachika that this situation is bad and smells like death. Tamachika expresses her bewilderment at how easily people die in this world. Meanwhile, the invisible maid sent by Lane walks in the corridor. The spirit asks if Tamachika wants to go outside, but she prefers to stay indoors as it's more comfortable. The spirit points out they can't stay inside forever, especially when there's an unseen enemy targeting Tamachika. Tamachika wonders what they can do against an invisible foe and decides to call Yogairai for help. In Yogairai's room, the phone rings while he dreams of his childhood, remembering moments with his dog and his caretaker. He wakes up and answers the phone, agreeing to go to Tamachika's room. As he steps outside, he senses the corridor is empty but detects the presence of the invisible maid. He uses his mental death note to make her collapse and enters Tamachika's room to explain the threat. Tamachika is puzzled about why she would be targeted, but Yogairai calls reception to report someone collapsed in the hallway. Tamachika questions his action, but Yogairai explains it's to avoid suspicion. Meanwhile, Takabana receives an alert that his maid's signal has disappeared, but he's preoccupied with dealing with a monster inside the dungeon. Back at the hotel, Tamachika realizes it was Takabana's maid who attacked, and Yogairai decides they need to leave. Tamachika calmly agrees, mentioning she's used to seeing death by his side and that humans will die anyway. They start to run, but another one of Takabana's servants appears, asking where they're going. Yogairai inquires about her intentions, but she traps him in an ice crystal, revealing she was ordered to bring Tamachika to her boss. Yogairai effortlessly breaks free from the ice, leaving the servant and Tamachika bewildered. When asked about how he did it, Yogairai explains that he killed the ice. Tamachika, confused by this explanation, so Yogairai clarifies that he can kill anything he thinks about. He then questions the servant about her ability to use magic without a staff, to which she responds that her class only allows her to use magic when holding a staff. Realizing that she must have spare wands, Yogairai inquires about them. The servant admits to having spare wands and retrieves one from her hair. Tamachika is embarrassed by the situation and tells Yogairai to stop looking. Yogairai is surprised by the unconventional hiding place but doesn't press further. He questions the servant about the orders they received regarding Tamachika. She reveals that all the maids received the same order. Suddenly, another girl appears on the ceiling and attempts to attack Tamachika. Tamachika uses her judo skills to subdue the girl. However, they realize that the attacker is actually a doll. More dolls surround them. At this moment, the girl with medium-sized breasts attempts to attack, but collapses and dies as soon as Yogairai considers it. Yogairai proceeds to kill all the dolls, causing the girl to panic. They eventually locate her and she pleads with them not to kill her, making Tamachika feel conflicted about their actions. Meanwhile, Takabana discovers that his servant is dead and that the girl has revealed their conversation to Yogairai and Tamachika. He informs the other maids about Yogairai's power, which they find difficult to believe. Takabana decides to observe them and plans to lead them into an ambush. Tamachika and Yogairai continue down the stairs but encounter a swarm of cockroaches. Tamachika is terrified and asks Yogairai not to say their name aloud. She realizes that Takabana is using the insects to spy on them. When asked if he can kill the roaches, Yogairai explains that while he can, the dead insects will fall on them. Tamachika refuses that idea, fearing the insects might enter her mouth. The spirit points out that Tekabana could turn the whole world against them. Tamachika decides to seek revenge on Tekabana and becomes determined. However, Tekabana intends to use the roaches to frighten them into screaming and fleeing. His maid warns him about Yogairai power, but he orders the roaches to attack with a bloodlust, scaring Tamachika. Yogairai suggests killing Tekabana since he doesn't think it will take much effort. He uses the roaches' killing intent to locate Tekabana and commands him to die. Tekabana collapses, shocking his servants. Tamachika is initially relieved, but the roaches remain active. Yogairai explains that his power never fails because if his enemies can reach him, he can also reach them, as the world won't allow someone to act without consequence. Meanwhile, Tekabana's helpers are still trying to heal him from his injuries, but one of them tells the other that they are now free from his control and walks away. Yogairai and Tamachika then walk through an alley to leave the city, but they suddenly hear screams. Upon checking, they see the city filled with zombies. The zombies start causing chaos in the city, and Tamachika wonders what is going on. Yogairai, however, mentions that the zombies are slow and they can escape if they're careful. Tamachika asks if they can't assist, and Yogairai replies that it will be difficult to save the city. Even the spirit advises them to leave before the situation gets worse. Meanwhile, in the city manor, Misuki, who released the zombies into the city, explains to the mayor that Lane, the vampire sage, granted him the city management rights. The mayor expresses concern about the zombies and mentions that Misuki is now undead. Misuki reassures the mayor and reminds him of their past battles. However, the mayor insists that Misuki gathers his zombies and leaves the city. The zombie guy reveals that this was Lane's order and requests the key to the city from the mayor. The mayor complies, and Misuki uses the city's speaker system to command his zombies to stop moving. Misuki introduces himself to the citizens and displays images of Yogairai and Tamachika on a large screen. He explains that he is searching for them and gives the remaining humans 1 hour to bring them to the central plaza. Failure to do so will result in the zombies being unleashed once again. Yogairai and Tamachika, who were attempting to sneak out of the city, overhear Misuki's announcement. They also learn that the entire city is locked down to prevent anyone from escaping. The citizens understand that they have 2 choices: capture Yogairai and Tamachika or become zombies. The mayor enters the room where Misuki is speaking, expressing concern about the harm to the citizens. Misuki argues that they wouldn't look for the 2 if he didn't threaten them. Citizens begin searching for Yogairai and Tamachika, forcing them to hide in alleys. Tamachika realizes that humans are now more dangerous than zombies and urges Yogairai to run. She asks why they are being pursued, and Yogairai believes it's because he killed the other sage. Suddenly, 3 girls find them and vow to capture or kill them, even if it means death. Yogairai warns that he will kill anyone who approaches, and when one of the girls tries to attack, he uses his mental death notability. The others panic, and Tamachika expresses her discomfort with this gruesome situation. Yogairai reminds her that these individuals are trying to kill them, so they should be prepared for the consequences. He notices the other 2 girls fleeing and becomes annoyed, thinking that Misuki is using them to test whether Yogairai can kill regular people. Yogairai decides to go to the central plaza to negotiate with Misuki, feeling irritated by the situation. As they approach, they find the plaza filled with eerie decorations, making Tamachika feel like she's in a fantasy world. Upon reaching Misuki, Yogairai straightforwardly asks who he is. Misuki initially doesn't recognize them and questions if they came to surrender. He calls them boring for trying to sacrifice themselves for the citizens. Yogairai retorts that Misuki is the one being stupid. Tamachika becomes anxious after hearing their exchange, and Misuki asks what Yogairai wants, warning that killing him would end the game. Yogairai expresses his desire to take a train to the royal capital and requests that Misuki removes the city's barrier. Misuki is taken aback by Yogairai's request and becomes angry. He points out that Yogairai is in no position to negotiate and questions what he has to offer. Therefore, Yogairai boldly declares that he will spare Misuki's life even though it might seem like a bad decision. This statement infuriates Misuki, who calls Yogairai crazy and asks if he wants to die right now. He commands his Immortal Core army to attack Yogairai, emphasizing that Yogairai cannot kill something that is already dead. However, to Misuki's astonishment, Yogairai simply orders the undead to die, and they all collapse. Misuki is left in shock, unable to comprehend what has just occurred, and the mayor seizes the opportunity to distance himself from the situation, claiming he had no involvement. Misuki, still struggling to understand, demands an explanation from Yogairai about how the undead suddenly died. Yogairai admits that he doesn't fully understand it either, but since the undead were moving, it implies they were considered alive by his standards. Tamachika, however, complains about how Yogairai casually dismissed the extraordinary event. Misuki remains in disbelief, and Yogairai delivers an assertive response, stating that he decides what's alive and dead. In other words, if it moves, it's alive, if it stops, it's dead. Frustrated, Mitsuki calls upon his master, Lane, but Yogairai remains unfazed and questions what Mitsuki can do now that his comrades are already dead. Mitsuki undergoes a transformation, resembling a mix between Batman and a werewolf, but Yogairai swiftly commands him to die. Tomochika laments that she wanted to see the transformation in action, but Yogairai sees no reason for it. She then asks about their next course of action, considering that they cannot negotiate with the deceased undead. Yogairai reassures her that it's not a problem and approaches the mayor, causing the man to panic and beg for his life. The mayor pleads that his only concern is the safety of his city. Yogairai explains that they took these actions to protect themselves. The mayor reveals that Sage Lane ordered Mitsuki to eliminate the two of them. Tomochika questions if Shaun isn't the real name, and the mayor clarifies that Shaun is also a sage, but the city is currently under Lane's control. Tomochika expresses confusion because they came to this world due to Shaun, and now another sage wants to kill them. The mayor admits he doesn't know much about it and doesn't usually interfere with sage candidates. The spirit then alerts Yogairai about some form of spiritual manipulation heading toward their location. Suddenly, Yogairai begins to sense killing intent from all around the plaza, with every citizen converging on their position. The mayor attempts to activate the key to the city's barrier to protect them from spiritual magic, but it doesn't work. He realizes that Lane is the one controlling the barrier. Meanwhile, Lane is trying to direct a massive monster toward the city. Her new vampire servant, a transformed slave from Tekabana, expresses concern about the danger. Lane, however, explains that Tekabana was killed from a distance because his hostility was detected. She inquires about her servant's assessment of Yogairai's threat level, and the servant acknowledges that it surpasses that of a sage or any mythical being. The servant implores Lane to stay away from Yogairai, but Lane refuses. She recognizes that despite her servant knowing that she's immortal, she genuinely cares for her, indicating that Yogairai must be some kind of god of death. Back in the city, Tomochika suggests to Yogairai that he should try to kill the source controlling the citizens. However, Yogairai explains that this situation is different from dealing with Tekabana. He proceeds to eliminate everyone who attempts to attack them, causing people to fall one by one. Yogairai feels like this is a test, similar to the ones he experienced as a child. Suddenly, he notices the mayor, who appears panicked as he watches his citizens die before him. Yogairai instructs the mayor to come closer, but Lane reveals that her plan is to indirectly cause Yogairai's demise. Therefore, Lane creates another clone of herself and instructs the clone to fly up and generate even more clones. Yogairai senses the increasing killing intent but also notices the emergence of the dark aggressor. This enormous aggressor begins destroying everything in its path, causing panic among the people. At the same time, Lane reveals that her clones have no knowledge of Yogairai, so they lack killing intent toward him. Tomochika inquires whether Yogairai can kill the aggressor, to which he responds affirmatively, surprising her. The mayor pleads with Yogairai to save the city, but Yogairai has reservations about doing so. Nonetheless, he ultimately orders the aggressor to die. While the effect takes place, Yogairai notices an attack from the air. He saves Tomochika from being hit, but they wonder if this attack is related to the aggressor's actions. Yogairai reveals that he killed the aggressor, but this new attack blends with the darkness's killing intent, making it difficult to discern a specific target. Yogairai thinks that everything up to this point may have been a test, but Tomochika urges him to focus on the situation. Looking at the sky, Tomochika notices several women descending in a regal manner. The mayor realizes that Lane is responsible for this. Tomochika asks Yogairai if he can do anything to stop Lane, but he explains that he can't because she isn't targeting him, and the women are moving too fast for him to track. Lane's clones, who all appear identical, raise questions about the number of Lanes in existence. The mayor reveals that they are clones, as Lane possesses super regeneration abilities. Yogairai believes he can deal with them, but it would be easier if Lane targeted him directly. The mayor displays a hologram of the city and explains that there is a pattern to the attacks. The aggressor does not strike the same place twice, and the attacks are spaced apart. Tomochika notes that they can use this information to predict the next attack location. The mayor quickly identifies the likely target, and Yogairai declares his intention to head there. The mayor offers assistance with his teleportation ability, but Tomochika insists on joining them. Despite Yogairai's initial reluctance, he agrees, recognizing that she is the only one who can see everything. The spirit also wants to help, and they prepare to teleport. Yogairai and Tomochika hold hands, and she guides him to the predicted attack location. He orders the clone to die, and the spirit employs an ability to create a protective shield around them. After the impact, the shield is removed, and Tomochika is relieved that she didn't die. However, Yogairai notices something on Tomochika's hand and inquires about it. Tomochika explains that the spirit used its power to combine some of her underwear with the previous aggressor's power, creating a shelter. As the clones fall and disappear, Lane questions how immortal vampires can die. Her servant advises against targeting Yogairai, but Lane decides to create new clones with different settings. Suddenly, she senses a strange feeling in her body and realizes that her true body, hidden in another dimension, is dead. She takes a daring leap into the unknown, disappearing, and the attacks cease. With the threat temporarily lifted, they return to the mayor to make preparations for their escape. Meanwhile, in a random house, a young girl awakens and notices her bed resembles a coffin. She believes she's a vampire and finds a rock in her hand. The rock displays Lane's hologram, revealing that her plan was successful and she died while the girl survived. Lane explains that the girl is a younger clone who was created without her memories to avoid being targeted by Yogairai. Back in the city, the mayor expresses gratitude for their help and provides them with a car, urging them to be cautious. Tomochika, frustrated with Yogairai's reluctance to drive, takes the wheel. Yogairai confesses that he tends to crash his car into walls when he plays games, so he doesn't know how to drive. Tomochika takes on the role of the driver, and the spirit reveals that her family possesses the skills to operate any vehicle. As they drive through a canyon, Tomochika tries to wake up Yogairai and persuade him to drive, but Yogairai is lost in a dream about the day he met Asaka, his foster mother, during a job interview at a research institute. Discovered a clause in the contract preventing her from complaining even if the job caused her death. She tried to reject it, but they forced her to sign it. While taking the elevator, she inquired about her job details. Yukio, the interviewer, revealed she would be taking care of a monster, shocking her. He explained that the institute conducted cursed experiments, and her job was related to that. Upon reaching the lower floor, Asaka noticed the darkness and strange writings on the doors. Yukio explained it was a scripture. As she asked where he was taking her, he mentioned it was her workplace. In another elevator, Yukio mentioned Alpha Omega and explained it meant everything or eternity. This would be the name of the test subject she was supposed to care for. Asaka asked if Alpha Omega was human, but Yukio couldn't confirm as he'd never seen it. He only knew that Alpha Omega could kill anything by mere thought. Asaka couldn't believe they expected her to care for such a monster. Yukio explained she was chosen because she had a teacher's license, and they believed only through education could they prevent humanity's downfall. She complained that there were better candidates, but Yukio insisted she was the perfect fit. Finally, they reached a vault door. Yukio couldn't go further and gave her instructions, leaving her with good luck wishes. Asaka used her card to open the vault and found something unexpected inside. She followed a map to a house and heard noise from a room. Upon entering, she discovered that Alpha Omega was a small, innocent child. Despite her initial shock, she scolded the child for being a normal kid and playing outside. However, when the child pointed his finger at her, Asaka remembered his ability to kill with his thoughts. She heard a noise and saw a shadow. The child explained it was a demon that often came to harm him. Asaka introduced herself and asked for the child's name. He said they called him Alpha Omega, but before, he was Lord Akakushi. He mentioned he was hungry, and Asaka realized she needed to prepare his meals. Checking the fridge, she found she couldn't cook, so she gave him cup noodles. The child, now named Yogairai, enjoyed them. Asaka asked about his parents, but Yogairai didn't understand. She apologized and decided to call him Yogairai. She taught him how to shake hands and greet someone. Tomochika woke Yogairai up to alert him about a boulder blocking their path. She mentioned that he had been sleeping for a while, but Yogairai explained it was because he had used a lot of power in the previous city. He then asked her the important question: why were they heading to the capital? Tomochika mentioned that all their classmates were heading there, and she turned the car around in hopes of finding an alternate route. However, they suddenly collided with something, and when they checked outside, they saw a dragon preparing to attack. Yogairai ordered it to die, and more dragons approached. They realized they were in dragon territory, and as the dragons prepared to breathe fire, Yogairai ordered them all to die. Tomochika compared it to a dragon insecticide commercial. After dealing with the dragons, they were covered by a shadow, and a huge golden thunder dragon appeared. Tomochika worried about lightning strikes, but Yogairai sensed no killing intent. The dragon told them they had passed and flew away in panic. Yogairai called out to it and asked why the dragons attacked if they could understand them. The dragon ignored him, but Yogairai threatened to do the same to it. The huge dragon turned out to be a little girl, and she explained she was testing if they were qualified to meet the Swordmaster. Tomochika was confused by her changing appearance due to parallel worlds. Yogairai asked why she attacked them, and she said it was to see if they were worthy of meeting the Swordmaster. However, Yogairai and Tomochika were more interested in getting to the capital. The girl praised the Swordmaster's skills and mentioned he could rival the sages. Yogairai thought he might have information on how to return home. Tomochika, feeling lost, didn't want to take a detour, but the girl, Attila, proposed a deal. She would guide them to the capital if they first met the Swordmaster. They agreed, and Attila explained they were heading to a spot where people were gathered for the selection of the Knight of the Holy King. which could lead to becoming the Sword Saint's disciple. So, everyone in the area is aiming to become the next Sword Saint. There's some initial confusion as one guy claims they've been disqualified for cheating, but another voice clarifies that the selection hasn't started yet, so nobody is disqualified. Then, the Sword Saint himself appears, an old man who gives everyone their first trial, which is a battle royale to the death until he decides to stop it. Tamachika is in disbelief, but Yogairai asks if he can leave. Attila is confused, but the old man creates a rule that if Yogairai leaves, everyone will be disqualified. The brutal battle begins with participants killing each other, while Yogairai and Tamachika watch. A group targets them and Yogairai decides to fight back. However, a random guy intervenes, claiming that everyone is misunderstanding the Sword Saint's intention. He believes it's a test of their personalities to become a Knight of the Holy King. Tamachika thinks the guy is decent, but the spirit reveals he's skilled. He handles multiple opponents without intending to kill them. Some participants try to use magic against Yogairai, but he orders them to die. The random guy is puzzled by their sudden demise, but assumes it's the old man's doing to punish lawbreakers. With everyone giving up on fighting them, the random guy asks them to stay a bit longer while he protects them. Suddenly, they hear a voice begging for help from a guy who has been sliced in half. Tamachika spots a rainbow-colored stone nearby and places it in the guy's hand. To their amazement, he crushes the stone, and his body regenerates. He thanks them, but the Sword Saint instructs them to stop fighting and follow him, as their numbers have decreased. As they venture into the forest, Tamachika wonders what they should do. Attila pleads with them to stay and participate in the trials. Yogairai is hesitant, but since they haven't obtained any information yet, he agrees to go along with it. As they move forward, other participants introduce themselves as Rick and Lionel. Rick explains that holy knights deal with gods known as demons who have been sealed away. The devil appeared 1,000 years ago and was sealed by the holy king of that era. Yogairai questions if the devil is still a threat, but Rick mentions that some followers are trying to unseal him. Tamachika takes the opportunity to ask Lionel about the rainbow-colored stone he had. He calls it an apology stone, which can heal him from serious injuries or be used as gacha tokens. Tamachika is puzzled, but Lionel explains that his luck is negative. He reveals that he became a sacrifice of a mysterious organization before arriving in this world. However, a goddess appeared to him and gave him these stones. Tamachika asks the spirit if gods like to control people's destinies, to which the spirit responds that some people are guarded by spirits, while others have their fates determined by gods. Rick inquires about gacha and Lionel demonstrates it. He needs 3 stones per pull, and Tamachika notices that he only has 3 stones left in his bag. Attila explains that they've reached an invisible barrier, and Tamachika learns that only participants can enter the tower. They enter the tower and take an elevator to the highest floor. There, the old man instructs them to look down, revealing a huge energy ball that represents the end of the world. Tamachika spots 2 figures, a man in black and a woman in white, with the woman's sword piercing both of them. The old man explains that his duty is to guard this place. A girl named Frederica attempts to end it by throwing a fireball into the energy ball, but it moves slowly due to time flowing differently inside the barrier. Another girl informs them of their trial. They must go from the roof to the first floor within 24 hours and accumulate 100 points inside the tower. Tamachika notices a new girl among the participants, and Yogiri suddenly seems nervous. He then reveals that he tried to kill the source of the miasma and succeeded in killing the Dark God. And that's the end of our video. To see more, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.